What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit more about Jordan Love and why this is such an important decision for the Packers to make this offseason and what they want to, officially do with Jordan. And it's a very complicated matter. Really quickly, the one piece of news, we had a very epic playoff game. First of all, Jaguars with a massive comeback against a really crazy choke job by the LA Chargers. I did not see that coming. The first half that Trevor Lawrence had, I mean, what mental fortitude to have 4 picks in the first half and just look beyond atrocious, and to put together that second half and come back and win the game. Really special stuff from Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, not Jaguars, Jaguars. Then we also had another playoff game that looked like it was going to be close at halftime. You had the 49ers making some uncharacteristic mistakes, and then they just pull away in the second half. 49ers win easily against the Seahawks. From a Packers news standpoint, we found out some fines that were given to Rasul Douglas and Quay Walker and bizarrely Jamal Williams. I'm not going to touch on this too much, but the fact that Jamal Williams was fined more for dancing in the end zone than Quay Walker was for pushing a physical assistant or medical assistant that was coming into the game to help out an injured player is beyond insane. And yes, you can tell me all the rules that you want, that it was Jamal Williams' second offense for dancing. I do not care. That can't happen. Like, you just have to have better common sense rules that if Quay Walker is pushing somebody that's not even a player, that is on the field, that is from the medical staff that's coming out to assist a player, that needs to be a much heavier fine than Jamal Williams thrusting his hips in the end zone. That should go without saying. The fact that it doesn't is just absolutely mind-numbing. But from a Packers standpoint, the one big thing that we did learn is that Quay was not suspended. Could have been suspended a game. That would not have shocked me, but was not suspended. So he will be able to play in week 1 of next season and will not have to face any sort of league suspension. So that is my quick news and notes. We have another round of playoff games. Clearly, all Packer fans will be cheering against the Vikings on Sunday, but should be hopefully a decent round of playoff games. I know you've got, Skylar Thompson having to go against the Bills. You've got Tyler Huntley probably going against the Bengals. You end up with some less than favorable matchups because of the injuries to Tua and Lamar, but hopefully we still get a very good playoff day on Sunday, which would be even better if the Vikings lost and kept that trophy case empty for another season. But on we go to Jordan Love. So I want to start off with Brian Gutekunst's comments on Jordan Love. He said, and I know I mentioned these yesterday as well, but he said, quote, he definitely thinks he's ready to play. He felt really good if he would have had to play significant time this season, and basically said that his next step is that he has to play in games. And we've heard similar sentiments from Matt LaFleur and some really great comments on how he's developed throughout the course of the season from Matt LaFleur. We even had that interview with his teammates in one of the local TV shows or radio shows. I forget which one it was, but that basically they were saying that when they go against him in practice every day, that he is, he feels like a better, player than the starters that they face on a week-to-week basis. So we've had these comments piling up from Jordan Love in very limited, minuscule playing time this year. I do feel like we've seen some significant steps from him. I do think the other quote from Brian Gutekunst, when he's asked, what's a better option, Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, and Brian basically said, well, one's a 4-time MVP. And yeah, obviously. And Jordan has yet to play in, really any meaningful football. He had the one game against Kansas City, which is hard to hold against them, a half against the Lions last year, a cup of tea here and there, but no real meaningful football, especially like being able to go into the game ahead of time and prepare for the game, to be able to, go back-to-back games to see what defenses are throwing at him. Like, those are things that you just, until you experience them, you have legitimately no idea of what that player is going to look like and what he can grow from when he actually gets that experience in the games as well. So those were sort of the comments that we've been hearing, is that he looks good. He looks like he could be a starter. He looks better. So again, those are important comments to note. Some of those comments you could chalk up to, what are they supposed to say? Is Brian Gutekunst going to be like, nah, he's not what we expected. He's really struggling. It just doesn't look good. Is Matt LaFleur going to be like, yeah, he's regressed all season and we're not sure what to do with him? Or his teammates going to be like, man, yeah, Aaron's really good. The guy that comes in on scout team and is our backup is a complete bum. Like, of course they're going to compliment him, right? So it all goes back to the biggest key here, and Brian Gutekunst very clearly said it, is that he needs to play in order to figure out what Jordan Love is and what he can be, and if he can take a step and if he can be a starter. Everyone just needs to see him play and evaluate his play on the field. And unfortunately, that has not been something that they've been able to do. Or fortunately, if you want to look at the bright side, that Aaron's been able to play in the vast majority of games. Clearly, that would have been a good thing, that you didn't have a starting quarterback that was missing significant time. But from a Jordan Love evaluation standpoint, not getting to see him for any significant playing time really hurts the overall evaluation and potential trade value, because if he goes in and he looks awesome and you want to go that route, then he could potentially fetch more in a trade as well. So that's that piece of it, of what's just some of the comments that we've heard some of the small playing time that we've seen him in, and just kind of some of the small improvements that he's made when we have been able to see him this year. I want to go back quickly, though, to this past season. One of the things that I mentioned is like the night that the season ended, the night that they lost to the Lions, is that you could make a strong argument that their 8-9 finish, once they were 4-8, to win 4 in a row and then lose in the last game, that, like, again, outside of losing in a Super Bowl or like another heartbreaking NFC Championship loss, that would probably sting worse. But just in general, like football, like optics, and like what you're like 8-9 and finishing in that fashion is arguably the worst thing that could have happened to the Packers this year. They don't make the playoffs. They have a heartbreaking loss at the end of the season when they had the chance to make the playoffs. They played really bad football for the majority of the year. You don't get the opportunity to evaluate your young players, specifically Jordan Love, in a capacity that you would have been able to if you were just a little bit worse and were eliminated from the playoffs sooner. So like you can make an argument that 2022 was almost a worst case scenario for how they ended up. If they're worse, they get a better draft pick and you get a Jordan Love evaluation. If they're one game better, they make the playoffs. And what I will say here to sort of add on top of that, and why that's an important distinction to make for today's show as we're talking about Jordan Love, is if you could go back to 2022, there is zero outcome. There is not a single outcome that in which the Packers would have been better off last year with Aaron Rodgers, with what we know now, with the benefit of hindsight, instead of Jordan Love. Let me rephrase that for a second. It would have been better in any situation that would have happened with Jordan Love last year, just by default, than what the Packers ended up with Aaron Rodgers in 2022. So let me explain that. The Packers end 8-9 on the season with Aaron Rodgers. They are caught a little bit in no man's land. Again, picking in the middle of the draft. They don't make the playoffs. They have an extremely disappointing season. Their offense looked atrocious, especially when it mattered most in a game against the Lions at the end of the year. Rodgers took a significant step back. And once again, you have no evaluation on Jordan Love. So nothing inherently went right. And yes, it's good to win some football games. It's not, you never take that for granted. They got 8 wins. They won 4 in a row to try to get back in things. And I do think there's some positives that you can take away from that. But let's go back in time and let's say Jordan Love was the starter all of last year. So the first scenario is, let's say he wins just one more game than what the Packers would have with Aaron Rodgers. And you might be thinking, Andy, that's ridiculous. There's no way. And I'm probably with you. I don't think they do better with Jordan Love than what they would have done with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think it's likely. But let's just even say there's a 4% chance, 2% chance, whatever percent chance you want to put on it. Let's say he wins one more game than Aaron Rodgers. Then that season would have clearly been much more successful, because not only did you get an evaluation of Jordan Love and get to see how he played, but he led the team to the playoffs, and we know that Rodgers did not now, again, in hindsight. So that would have been better. If they would have went 8-9 with Jordan Love, you would have had the exact same record, and we would have got a Jordan Love evaluation, and we would have got Jordan Love experience, right? We would have, like, now you're like, okay, he went 8-9 in his rookie year, and you actually got to see him play, and maybe he built off of it as the season went along. So that would have been a better scenario than going 8-9 with Aaron Rodgers. You could also make an argument like, all right, 6-11, 7-10, that those records with seeing Jordan Love would have been better than 8-9 with Aaron Rodgers, because you still get experience for Love. You get to make an evaluation with him. You still don't make the playoffs, so it's not that much different. And you get a better draft pick at the end as well. So that's not that much worse. Then you get into the 5-win, 4-win, 3-win area, and that's not ideal. And you might say, I would rather have 8 wins with Rodgers than, 4, 5, 6 wins with Jordan Love. And I'd be like, okay, but what did you accomplish with the Aaron? Like, you can argue that Green Bay basically accomplished nothing in their special teams took a step, but like, other than that, you would be hard pressed to like point to something that Green Bay accomplished in 2022. Like, what did we gain out of 2022? No player who played in 2021 got better, got of any real significant increase in 2022. Certainly your draft picks, but those draft picks would have been good regardless of who was at quarterback. Like, so what did you accomplish in 2022 with what we know now? Right. So at least in the 4, 5, 6 win games, maybe Love looks bad, but at least you get an evaluation of him and at least he got some experience and you were able to see what happened. And then you've got the no wins, 1 win, 2 win scenarios. In that case, Jordan's probably not the guy. He probably played pretty terrible in that situation. And that's not a great outcome, but now you've got potentially the opportunity to take one of those quarterbacks early in the draft and start fresh there. And that Jordan's not the guy, which is an important distinction nonetheless. Like, you might say that's a worse scenario, and you could make that argument, but at least what Jordan Love is and that he's probably not the guy. So I would make a strong argument that in 2022, any scenario with Jordan Love that would have played out, whether it be 0 wins, a Super Bowl win, the same 8-9 record that they had, slightly worse, any of it would have actually been a much better outcome on the season, that we would have actually gained information, gained knowledge out of what happened to Jordan Love, and been able to make an evaluation and a determination if he was your quarterback moving forward than what we learned in 2022 with Aaron Rodgers, which was 8-9. What the heck do we do now? The team played like crap the majority of the year. Nobody really stepped up. You've had a good rookie class, and that's it. You're just left in no man's land. You're left with no information. And I think what really needs to be known here is that you want to avoid that happening again in 2023. This is probably the offseason that really matters for Jordan Love in making the ultimate determination of whether or not you want him to come back and be your quarterback, or if you just don't believe in him and it's time to go in a different direction. And that's why this offseason is another referendum on Jordan Love and what the Packers believe that Jordan Love is. Even more so than it was in 2022. And it was a referendum on Jordan Love in 2022 as well. Because remember, let's play this out. It has been reported that the Denver Broncos, were their primary target at quarterback in 2022 was Aaron Rodgers. It wasn't Russell Wilson. Their primary target in a trade was Aaron Rodgers. And as soon as Aaron Rodgers decided that he was staying in Green Bay and not demanding a trade, not wanting to go to Denver, as soon as that happened, they switched and they traded for Russell Wilson. It has been reported on multiple occasions that is what happened. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Broncos would have given the same package that they did for Russell Wilson for Aaron Rodgers. But if that was their primary target, I think it probably means that, or at least something extremely close. And let's just be real here. And I've said this before, and I'll say it right now again. If the Green Bay Packers had a firm belief at last season at this time that Jordan Love was ready to play as a starting caliber NFL quarterback, you make that deal with your eyes closed. You cannot say yes quick enough. You sign off on it as fast as you possibly can. If you believe that Jordan's the guy, this is what the Seahawks got in exchange: 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant. Let me say that one more time: 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a 5th, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant for Russell Wilson and a 4th-round pick. So, by the way, that 1st and 2nd-round pick last year was the 9th pick and the 40th pick. At number 9, they could have had Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave. At 40, they could have had Kenneth Walker, the Seahawks running back, right? Those were legitimate choices that they could have made. Maybe they take Boye Mafe, who the Seahawks took at that pick in pick 40. They would have had more edge depth. Maybe they don't make the trade up for Christian Watson. Maybe he's just there at pick 40. Maybe they take, they could have gone in a million different directions, but they could have had pick 9 and 40 last year and then still had a 1st and 2nd-round pick coming up from the Broncos in this upcoming draft as well. That's all to say that if you believed in Jordan Love at that time and you thought he was going to be a legit top 18-ish starting quarterback, you do that deal so fast, because that is a massive, massive haul of talent and draft picks that would have changed the trajectory of this Packers roster, especially when you traded Devontae too for a first and a second. All of a sudden you've got your first, you've got the Broncos first, you've got the Raiders first, you've got the Raiders second, your second, the Broncos second, and now you've got a first and a second next year from the Broncos, your first and second. You are cooking with gas, and you have, like I said, completely changed the trajectory of your season. And maybe that deal wasn't quite as much. Rodgers was older, and there was always the threat that he could retire after just 1 year, where that wasn't really the threat with Wilson. So maybe they weren't offering quite as much. But maybe it's just like a first and a second or something like that. It still would have been a significant haul for Aaron Rodgers this past year. And again, if they believed in Love, they'd take that deal. They didn't. That was in some capacity a referendum and a commentary, if you will, on Jordan Love. That said, even though last year I said, prior to even knowing about the Russell Wilson deal, I said it was time to trade Aaron Rodgers. I also said at the same time, I wholeheartedly understood not trading him last year because he was just the back-to-back MVP. That is an extremely tough thing to do. The guy won back-to-back MVPs and is telling you that he wants to come back and play for your team, and you're like, nah, we're going to trade you. It is extremely difficult. This is not Madden. This is not fantasy football. These are real people. And as a coach and a GM, there's a lot more job security with Aaron Rodgers than there is with an unknown quarterback. That is just the absolute truth of it. So I totally understand last year, 2 back-to-back MVPs. He's playing phenomenal football. He wants to come back. Going in a different direction is really hard in that scenario. It would have been the right thing to do. I thought so at the time, and clearly in hindsight, that would have been the right thing to do. But it's a very difficult thing to do, and I don't blame Green Bay for saying hey, we're going to take one more shot with the back-to-back MVP and see if we can win this thing, because there would have been a cost no matter what, right? Because if Rodgers goes and plays great in Denver, and you would have always been wondering if we would have kept him just one more year, could we maybe have won a Super Bowl? So there's always a risk there. So I get it. I understand it. But now you have this year, and Rodgers is coming off, I wouldn't even say arguably, I would just say it is the worst starting year of his career. You saw a significant decline, and in all likelihood, you are probably going to get some clear, whether it's draft capital or something, there's going to be assets that come in return for Aaron Rodgers. Probably nowhere near the haul that they could have got from Denver last year, but probably a first round pick, maybe more. That's still a significant deal. And especially for a player that could retire at any time. And if he retires, this is all a moot point, obviously. But if he doesn't, if he decides he wants to play, these are all conversations that you need to go through. And my point being here isn't necessarily today whether or not they should do it or that they should trade Rodgers or whatever. That episode's coming in on Monday, by the way. But what this topic is that if Green Bay says after Rodgers' worst season of his career, as he's going to be 40 in next year. He's 39 right now. He's going to be 40 in his 2023 season. If they say, we want to bring back Rodgers, not after back-to-back MVP seasons, after the worst season of his career, after significant signs of decline, even with I get the injuries, I get that aspect of it. I get that the offense wasn't set up perfectly. I get all those things. When I grade Rodgers on my grades, and when I say he struggled in a game, if there's pressure on Rodgers, that's not a negative grade on Aaron. If the receivers aren't open down the field, that's not a negative grade on Aaron. I'm grading him on the plays where he has the ability to make a play when there are receivers open, when the blocking does hold up. I'm not grading him negatively on plays that aren't his fault when at the beginning of the year, Royce Newman and Jake Hansen can't hold up for the life of them on the right side of the offensive line against Zadarius Smith. That's not on Aaron. Those aren't plays that I'm grading negatively. I'm only grading the plays where he has an opportunity. And to be so much worse this year than he was in all of the previous seasons that I've ever graded is still an indictment on Aaron, regardless of the weapons that were around him. Now, if he had better weapons, he'd have more opportunities, would make more splash plays, would ultimately grade better because of that. I get that. But I'm not grading him in those negative plays because of other factors. It's just when he has an opportunity to make a throw or make a play. And there were far too many times where there were opportunities where the line protected and he had players downfield throw to, and he couldn't make the play. He couldn't make the throw. Overthrows, throws to the sidelines, underthrows, intercepted throws, sacks taken, sack fumbles. Like, there was just far too many of it, or just missed inaccurate throws. So now you've seen that Aaron Rodgers. And now you've seen a step up from Jordan Love, and everyone seems to feel like the next step for Jordan is that he's ready to play and that he needs to play. If that's the case, then you play him. And if they don't, if they say, you know what, we're going with Aaron again, that to me is telling that they don't really believe in Jordan Love. There's no other way to read that. Like, and I know some of you will say, like, Andy, it's still Aaron Rodgers. He's the 4-time MVP. And, like, do you not want to give that one more chance? Not if Jordan's ready. No, I don't. Not after what I just saw this past season. Not after we saw 2 MVP seasons where he was phenomenal with the best wide receiver in football, where in 2020, they couldn't win at home against the Buccaneers. In 2021, they couldn't win a single playoff game. So even when Rodgers was at his best, and even when he had the best wide receiver in football, those teams weren't good enough to get it done. And now when you take that number 1 wide receiver away and Aaron takes a bit of a step back as a passer, it's an 8-9 season. You don't even get in the playoffs. If you're trending that out, that is not trending in the right direction. My faith that he could, because here's the bottom line on it, is if you think that they're going to win the Super Bowl next year, if you think that's a legitimate chance that Green Bay brings back Rodgers and they can win a Super Bowl, yeah, I guess I kind of get it. It's just you're going to be I would be hard pressed to feel confident going into next year. We'll see what the roster ends up being, because I think this is what they're going to do. I think Rodgers will be back, and I think they're going to bring a lot of these guys back, and I think it's going to be 2022 part 2. I think we're going to see a lot of the same thing. I don't think that team has the ability to make a run towards a Super Bowl. And they might be better. Maybe they're 10-7, maybe they're 13-4 again. But to make a run through the playoffs and be better than they were in those seasons when they had Adams and Rodgers was playing at an MVP level, I don't see that. And if you don't think that Rodgers, in probably what is his last year, maybe he plays 2 more, whatever it is, but if you don't think he has the ability and the Packers have the ability to make a run towards that Super Bowl, then what are you doing it for? So if they bring him back, to me, that is still an indictment of what they feel about Jordan Love. And I know that they maybe will try to have their cake and eat it too, bring back Aaron, make a run, and see if Jordan can play the following year. Because of the 5th-year options and because of where Jordan's at in his career, Jordan could very easily try to force a trade out of Green Bay. And I think I'm going to end on this. I might have to review my notes here for a second, but I think I'm going to end on this. Is if Jordan Love, if you don't move to Jordan Love this year, no matter what, the Jordan Love decision probably becomes a fail. Because if you go with Rodgers and Love goes to another team and he's great, that is the biggest fail that you could possibly imagine. In no scenario can you let Love go somewhere else and be a really good quarterback, because that is beyond brutal. Now, if you go with Rodgers and you trade away Jordan Love and he's bad, it's still a fail. And what I mean by that, it's a fail previously, right? That you spent a 1st-round pick on Jordan Love, and at a time where you are, ready to make a run towards a Super Bowl, that you used a 1st-round pick on a backup quarterback. You had 4 years basically to develop him as a passer, as a legitimate quarterback, because there was no question about the talent that he had. So you had 4 years to develop him. You couldn't. And then when you had the opportunity to move to him, he wasn't ready. You trade him away and you end up with getting less in return than you spent on him in the first place at a time when you were competing for a Super Bowl. So if now is not the time to move to Jordan, no matter what happens from here on out, it was a failed move for Jordan Love. You do still have a small sliver if he comes in and he plays well and he can be a legitimate starter. It doesn't look as bad then, but you're probably going to have to make that decision sooner, like now, not sooner rather than later. Like, you have to make it now. Now is the time to move to him, or like I said, he could demand a trade and that could get messy as well. So that will be something worth monitoring. And I just want to note one more thing here too. It is possible. It's possible that Love just isn't good. it's possible that all of our conjecture of, wanting to see Jordan Love and what he is capable of, it's possible that the Packers just feel like 90% confident that he's just a bad quarterback, and that's why they don't want to move forward with him. I don't know. We don't know. We don't know their legitimate feelings on Jordan Love and what they think he can be moving forward. Personally, regardless of who it is, when he has that type of talent and you've spent that much time developing him, I think you would like to see him get in a handful of games to see if your evaluation is correct. Because guess what? Sometimes evaluations are wrong. Sometimes that's going to happen. So being able to see him in games would be really beneficial, and they haven't been able to do that. Like I said, the worst case scenario that could possibly happen is that you trade him away and he goes and tears it up somewhere else. That is the one thing that cannot happen. So we'll see what happens. Maybe they believe in Love. Maybe they just believe in Aaron Rodgers more. That's a possibility. But I think that this is ultimately we're going to learn a lot about what the Packers feel about Jordan Love, because in its simplest terms, if they think he's ready, if they think he's a legitimate NFL starting quarterback, if they think he can be a top 15 guy in this league, it doesn't matter that it's a 4-time MVP. It is a 40-year-old quarterback who's coming off the worst year of his career, and you've got a young top 15 quarterback, if that's what they would think, a young top 15 quarterback that's ready to come in and lead your team. And if you don't have the, fortitude to make that move, to go to your younger quarterback, then you're not in the right job. So that's why I'm not saying, again, today's show is not whether they should or should not. It's just to point out that if they don't go to Love, that is a huge commentary on that they don't think either one of two things. Either it's a huge commentary that they don't think Jordan Love is ready, or they are making a massive, massive mistake. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow discussing what Green Bay should do with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. So make sure to check that out. Subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.